The diner lay silent save for the faint whir of the overhead fan and the gentle tap of a coffee cup being placed down somewhere along the counter. Dawn light poured through the expansive windows, casting elongated golden shapes across the checkered floor. And amid that stillness, that almost dreamlike tranquility, a young girl sank to her knees. Her hands shook as she pressed them together. Her voice shattered as she called out, her tears reflecting the light like fragments of glass. Every biker present turned toward her, frozen in shock. It wasn't the sort of scene you'd anticipate in a place like this, not before men who resembled storm clouds and traveled in packs. Yet there she knelt, a child, pleading with them to take her into custody. If you believe in compassion, in redemption, and in occasions that remind us humanity still endures in this world, please take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Untold Stories 0.4. This story deserves to be experienced, not merely witnessed. Her name was Sophie Maynard, and she was merely 8 years old. The first time she entered the Devil's Diner, she appeared as though she hadn't rested in weeks. Her hair was disheveled, her blouse dusty and ripped, and her knees scraped from scrambling across rough concrete. The bikers, members of the regional crew known as Devil's Disciples, had assembled for their customary Sunday morning meal, a tradition they'd maintained for years. Among them sat Grayson Hole, a man constructed like a fortress, his beard streaked with silver and his arms marked with a lifetime of decisions. He was the chapter president, feared by some, honored by all. When Sophie collapsed to her knees before him, every skull pivoted, every utensil suspended in midair. Her voice quivered as she begged, "Please, please arrest me. I can't return home." The declaration hit the men more forcefully than they'd care to acknowledge. These were bikers who had witnessed everything: brawls, grief, even incarceration, but nothing had prepared them for a weeping child pleading for consequences she hadn't earned. Grayson's jaw tightened. He crouched slightly, attempting to catch her gaze. Behind him, the others observed, some trading bewildered looks, others simply watching in stillness. Sophie's account emerged between strangled gasps. Her mother had died months earlier. Since then, she'd been residing with her mother's partner, a man who vowed to look after her, but transformed into something vicious instead. He faulted her for everything, for expenses, for his rage, for the emptiness he harbored like venom. Every evening, she'd conceal herself beneath the kitchen table until he departed for the tavern, and every dawn, she'd awaken hoping someone would remove her from there. That morning, she'd fled. She didn't even understand where her legs were carrying her until she spotted the gathering of leather-clad men outside the establishment, rugged, boisterous, and formidable. In her innocent mind, they resembled authority itself. So, she reasoned, if anyone could arrest her, perhaps they could also rescue her. The men didn't know how to respond. They were accustomed to machinery, not sorrow. The youngest biker, a tall man named Rhett, appeared as though he might weep himself. Grayson stood there, motionless for an instant, his thoughts divided between disbelief and fury, not toward the girl, but toward whoever had convinced her she was the burden. He finally spoke gently, inquiring where she resided, who had harmed her, and how long it had been occurring. She could scarcely reply. She simply kept murmuring, "Please don't send me back." Grayson straightened himself and regarded his crew. They didn't require words, one signal, and every single one of them understood what was about to unfold. They weren't officers, but they were men who recognized injustice when they encountered it. Within moments, Grayson led them outside, engines rumbling like thunder as they rode toward the dilapidated house Sophie had described. She remained behind at the diner with the cook, a compassionate older woman named Marlene, who dried her tears and offered her a warm mug of cocoa. When the bikers arrived at the house, they didn't enter enraged. They entered resolute. The man who answered the door stumbled backward when he saw them, 10 men in black leather vests positioned. Shoulder to shoulder, their faces cold as granite. Grayson didn't touch him. He didn't have to. Just one statement left his lips: "You'll never lay a hand on that girl again." Then he placed the call, not to intimidate, not to brawl, but to the sheriff. By nightfall, the man was in handcuffs, and Sophie was officially placed under the supervision of social services. But the story didn't conclude there. Weeks elapsed and the Devil's Disciples continued appearing, not to frighten anyone, but to visit Sophie. They brought her meals, clothing, and even a small pink bicycle with her name painted along the frame. Grayson found himself checking in every day after work, claiming it was merely to ensure she's okay. But deep down, he knew she had awakened something inside him, something he believed he'd buried long ago. He had once lost a daughter in a car accident. Her name had been Hazel, and she would have been just about Sophie's age now. One bright afternoon, when Sophie saw Grayson waiting outside the diner again, she sprinted straight toward him. She wasn't frightened anymore. Her eyes glowed as she announced she was starting school again soon, that she was living with a foster family nearby, and that she missed everyone at the diner. Grayson felt his throat constrict. When she embraced him, he didn't know what to say. He simply rested his weathered, tattooed hand tenderly on her back and whispered, "You did nothing wrong, kid. You were brave." That evening, when the bikers assembled for their usual coffee, the discussion wasn't about road trips or engines. It was about Sophie. They decided without hesitation to sponsor her education, to be present every year, every achievement. They called her their little sister. Months later, at a local charity ride, Sophie stood at the edge of the street waving a handmade sign that read, "Thank you for saving me, The entire group slowed their bikes as they passed her, the wind whipping through her hair, and for the first time in a long time, the large gruff men who once ruled the road felt tears prick their eyes. If this story touched even a small part of your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to Untold Stories. Let's fill this world with stories that remind us kindness can come from the most unexpected places. Now, before the ending, I want you to comment below. Would you have stopped for Sophie that day if you saw her kneeling on the diner floor? I'd love to know what your heart says. Grayson never considered himself a hero. But every Sunday morning when the bikes rolled into the diner parking lot and Sophie's laughter rang through the air, he'd glance at her and smile quietly. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't battling the world. It's protecting the smallest soul who believes the world has already abandoned her. And for the devil's disciples, that was the ride of their lives.